Again, is probably the most athletic player on this team.
Why you would use that, especially when one call.
Just a horrible situation for them.
I don't think that's going to happen.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of TakeaSide. I'm your host, Max McElroy, and we've got a great show for you today, live from our studio for the last time this semester. Before we get started, be sure to log on to Sided.co or the Sided Debates app to post, comment, and engage with different topics across all sports. The more engagement your post gets, the faster you will climb that leaderboard for a chance at a $25 Amazon gift card. On Sunday, all the college football bowl games were announced, leading up to an announcement of the college football playoff teams, which is what we will be discussing today. Our panel of John Peterson, Jordan Ziegler, Dylan Vanderveen, and Matt Minier are going to discuss who they are picking to win it all this year. Matt, who are you taking?
Well, I think it's got to be the best team all year. It's got to be the Georgia Dogs.
Boring.
Yeah, very boring.
Nah,
Very boring.
They're the best team in the league. They're the best team in football.
But it's still boring.
Okay. So you look at this defense. This defense is one of the best in the country. Second-ranked defense in points per game, only giving up 13 points per game. And you got guys projected first-rounders like Jalen Carter on defensive line. You got Kelly Ringo, cornerback. These guys have dogs. They're Georgia Bulldogs. They got dogs in their team, man. And their offense isn't a joke either, averaging 38 points per game, which is good for 11th in the country, and top 20 in both rushing and passing offense. This team has been the best all year. I think they're going to continue that streak in the playoff against Ohio State, and then eventually we'll see TCU and Michigan.
Here's my problem with Georgia here. Like, they won the national championship last year over Alabama. I don't think they win it back-to-back. I don't see teams winning it back-to-back. I just don't see teams winning it back-to-back.
But I think
Michigan, even though Georgia has been very good in the SEC, they've struggled with some games like the game versus Missouri. You saw some weakness that Georgia's had. Michigan looks like a very complete team this year. Michigan, I think they're going to win it all. I think they do have the team to win it last year. They're a little bit weaker than they are this year. This year they're complete. McCarthy's playing great for them. They lost Blake Corum in the couple of games ago, but Donovan Edwards has carried that with 216 yards and 185 yards in the last two games.
That's a 2-game sample size, though.
I don't care. He's ran for over 200 yards a game, two straight games.
Okay, like casually be like, the team lost arguably the best running back in the nation.
Blake Corum ran for 1,400 yards.
That.
He ran for 1,400 yards, but I trusted Michigan's offensive line enough now that they've proven it over two games.
Against
400
Ohio
yards,
State, who's got not a great defense, and then Purdue.
Purdue.
Yeah, like,
I still don't care. You think TCU's defense is any better towards the title game?
Yes.
No, that's just so not true. They're giving up like 34 points a game.
Big 12.
What do you mean, Big 12?
Big 12. That's the argument. That's what I mean. Big 12. High offense.
So you don't need any defense to like win the national championship?
Yes. LSU 2019.
Georgia, you want to get in on this because you got the number one defense in the country.
I want to go back to your point where they only beat Mizzou by how much was it? By 4. They've blown out everybody they played. They brought number 11 Oregon to start the season, 49-3. Look at this team. This team is power on offense. Okay, we beat Tennessee.
Oregon's also
Tennessee, who was ranked number 1 at the point. They beat them by 14 points.
Oregon lost 2 of their
Tennessee
final
were
games.
They're frauds.
Okay, they lost 10. Okay, I don't know.
Shout out
That's
to
a
Bo
debate.
Nix, though. I like Bo Nix.
That's another debate for another time. But then LSU in the championship game, they won by 20 and they put up 50 points. Like, this team is just not great offensively, but defensively too.
They gave up 30 points though to LSU.
But they scored 50, so they can hang with any team. Even
Yeah,
TCU.
50 to 30. I mean that.
Anyway,
your point.
I still haven't gotten my chance to explain why TCU has a legitimate shot to win the national championship. So if I may elaborate a little bit.
Go ahead.
TCU has the 16th best total offense in the nation, including being top 25 in both passing and rushing.
Big 12.
Well, yeah, the Big 12 has really good offensive teams, including TCU. I would just like to throw that out there. Max Duggan's thrown for over 3,000 yards. Kendre Miller has rushed for over 1,000 yards. I mean, that's two huge offensive pieces. right there.
I just don't think they can go against Michigan and Georgia's defense.
Okay,
and
well, so when
survive like that.
okay, let's talk about like in big games, national championship, semifinal situation. A lot of times, what happens is mistakes are what's going to separate the two teams, right? Max Duggan doesn't make any mistakes. He's got a 30-4 TD to interception ratio. He's thrown 30 touchdowns and only 4 picks all year. If you're looking at a guy that hardly ever throws interceptions and puts the team on his back, like you can see him putting the team on his back in that game against K-State, Max Duggan is willing to go not just the extra mile, the extra 3 miles for TCU to win this game. He's physically exhausted at the end of that game. He doesn't throw interceptions. Max Duggan is the reason why TCU has a legitimate chance.
And that was versus
They
K-State.
lost to
Okay,
K-State,
here's the thing, though. He put his whole entire body on the line. I don't know if Max Duggan, do you think Max Duggan could be doing any better than this? Like, do you think he could play any better than he did against K-State in that
Yes.
fourth quarter? You think he could play better than that?
Yeah, he could
I
throw
disagree.
better.
Okay,
100%.
okay, I say you could throw
All
a
right,
little bit better,
hey.
but you're not running like that
We
against
still
Michigan
have not heard
or
the
Georgia.
Ohio State argument.
No one wants to
yeah.
hear the Ohio
Everything
State.
you
They
guys-
barely got in.
Hey,
They got in because
Everything-
USC
no.
got it.
We
Everything
gotta
you
give him a
guys
chance.
said-
We gotta give him a chance. We gotta give him a chance.
Everything you guys have said has been great, but it's always been Ohio State. It's
Oh,
always
No,
been
it
Ohio
hasn't. No, it
State.
hasn't.
I don't know why I said we have to
They
go to
barely
Ohio
made it
State.
in.
That's
They barely
my
made
fault.
it
That's my fault.
Ohio
too.
State has played perfectly all season except
Oh,
for
Michigan.
one half against Michigan. They played one
So
bad
the
half
one good,
Northwestern.
the one like
They used-
The
legitimate
one half that
good
mattered
team.
the most. The
Against-
half that mattered the
Hey,
most.
hear me out.
So the one playoff
They
caliber
have-
team they've played all year, they played awful.
They have the most talented quarterback in the college football playoff, along with 2,000-yard
That's
receivers.
not true at all.
The best receiver.
JJ
Marvin
McCarthy is
Harrison
not
Jr.
the best quarterback in
No,
the college
I'm
playoff.
talking about CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud's the
Oh, we're talking about Ohio State. That's my bad. That's my bad.
I'm
That's
talking
my
about
bad.
Ohio State. CJ Stroud is the best quarterback, potential Heisman winner, potential #1 pick in the draft. They're the only team in the college football playoff that's won all their games by double digits. Georgia, you can't say barely beat Missouri.
But every other game they won by double digits, and they've blown teams out.
Could have lost that one.
Even they were on the road against
Hey,
Mizzou.
Ohio State's won every single game by over 10 plus points, except for Michigan. But that was one.
And their
one
one
bad
loss
half.
And Georgia
was by
won
3
bad half.
scores.
Georgia
you know,
hasn't
so-
lost though.
Georgia hasn't
lost.
played a team like Ohio State all year. Ohio State's been the consensus #2 team all season.
But Ohio State's been so inconsistent.
That's
though.
debatable.
They've been
They've
so
won.
inconsistent.
Their offense, Georgia has not faced an offense like Ohio State. I know
Tennessee?
Tennessee?
No,
I would
not
say
like Ohio
Tennessee's
State.
better
It's
than
hard
Ohio
to
State's
argue for
offense.
me.
Tennessee with
Hooker?
Hendon Hooker
With
is the
Hooker?
best. Tennessee
That
right
offense
now
was
is still
insane.
ranked as the best total
Hendon Hooker.
offense in the nation.
Even when he's been out.
Like you can't argue with the fact that they are literally ranked as the best offense in the nation. Not Ohio State, Tennessee is.
I'll give it to you that CJ Stroud's a better quarterback. They weren't a better offense than Tennessee.
The loss to Michigan was a learning. They needed to lose. They went into that game way too confident. They thought they knew they were going to win. They got blown out. It was a learning experience. They're going to come back. They're going to beat Georgia. They're going to beat Georgia in a shootout. Offensive
Stetson
shootout.
Bennett is going to outplay.
It's going to be a
CJ Stroud.
shootout.
Shootout against Georgia.
Stetson Bennett is a 25
If Ohio State is on, they're going to win in a shootout. And then rematch against Michigan, that's a win. That's a win. Jim Harbaugh chokes.
Michigan's not winning.
They choke Michigan chokes every year.
I can
It's
agree.
going to happen again this year as well.
I can agree if we do get a Michigan Ohio State rematch, which isn't going to happen, then Ohio State would win that game. Like they're not going to lose to Michigan twice in the year. But you can't call like a learning experience losing by 3 scores to your biggest rival at home.
In the first
That's
half,
not a
the
learning
first half of
experience.
that
That's
game,
getting blown
You
out.
play 2 halves. You don't play one
I know,
half.
but
That's
I'm
just
saying,
not being a better football team.
I'm just saying, first half, we were up 20-17, end of the first half. It was one bad
So
quarter.
you were up by
a couple
you
bad
were up by
mistakes.
you were up by
led
3
to a
points.
snowball.
You were
One
up by
bad-
3 points at halftime and then lost by 3 scores. That's hurting your
But what
argument.
did-
not
couple
helping.
bad
I'll
mistakes
piggyback on
in
Ziggy here.
one game.
I'll piggyback on Ziggy
One game.
here. What makes you win a national championship? As few mistakes as you can possibly make. When you
And
mention
Max Duggan makes the least amount of mistakes.
But his team.
But Ohio
his team doesn't
State's-
help him. It's just him.
It's just he's
It's just
got.
Duggan.
No,
It's
it's not.
just Duggan.
I mean, he's got
TCU has
Johnston, and he's got a running back who ran over 1,200 yards. But
one 1,000-yard rusher, and their backup rusher is at 903 yards this year. They almost had 2 1,000-yard rushers on
that Big
offense.
12 defense.
I mean, we're not gonna have to
like-
worry about TCU because Michigan's gonna blow them out in the first game. But it doesn't.
Well, that's
matter.
not true also
And
because
you're not gonna make it there either. But
for,
you know,
for
whatever.
starters, TCU has beaten more AP top 25 teams than anyone else in the playoffs. And secondly, TCU's had 5 one-score games, which a lot of you guys might argue is a bad thing, not a good thing. I would argue the opposite. More than likely, you're going to be in a one-score game in the college football playoffs, And the team with the most experience in those tight situations, that's been in it year in and year out, not only at home, but on the road in hostile environments, clearly has the advantage when you get into the fourth quarter with 2 minutes to play and you're down by 3 points or you're up by 3 points. TCU has the most experience in that situation, which arguably is probably what the semifinal and national championship's going to come down to.
I just don't think this might just make everybody hate me, but like I just don't
You're
think
already
a
there.
Big 12 team can just compete with like a complete team like Michigan or with Georgia.
they lost to
I'm gonna be honest
K-State.
with
Or
you.
Ohio
They lost
State,
to K-State.
honestly.
K-State's a top 10 team in the nation. To call them not complete is
Okay, I'm
kind of
not saying they're
ridiculous.
bad,
They're
but
in a New
yeah.
Year's Six Bowl. They're playing Alabama. They won a Power 5 conference. They're
Okay,
in
but
the
would
Sugar
you
Bowl.
say that
That's
Cincinnati,
a very
would
complete
you see
team.
that Cincinnati and Michigan were complete last year when they made it to the college football playoff? I don't think either one of those teams were complete.
I would say Michigan was a complete team last year. They just had a bad game against Georgia. I think if Georgia and Michigan
Georgia's too
last year
good.
played 5 times, Michigan could win 3 of them. But I don't know why we're talking about last year's teams. I mean, we're talking about the 4 on the panel this year.
I'm just saying. You said what you said about like TCU being a complete team.
Yeah,
and you're saying
which they are.
that if you make the top 4, then you're obviously a complete team. If you're in a New Year's Six bowl, well, I'm just saying Cincinnati was not one of those, and they made the college football playoffs last year.
I would argue.
So it's possible.
I'd argue
I'm
Cincinnati
saying.
going undefeated, beating multiple Power 5 schools throughout the year last year, and then subsequently winning their conference and making the college football
The
playoffs
AAC.
made them.
I just think you
AAC
can't trust
conference.
TCU with how they played throughout the year, like barely beating Baylor on that last second.
They almost lost to
Crazy. It was
Jason
a
Bean.
That's what I'm
fantastic-
saying.
It was a great play, but
They've
it's just
pulled off crazy things like that.
against horrible teams.
Baylor's not a
Against
horrible
horrible
team
teams,
by
they
any
could
stretch
be
of
like
the
2 losses.
imagination.
They're a 6-6 team. They were a mediocre team this year.
Any team that TCU has beaten by 1 score is all either at 500 or over 500 this year. They're not playing close games against bad teams. Georgia beating Mizzou by 4 points. TCU is playing close games against good teams. Arguably, the Big 12 might have been one of the more complete conferences with the least amount of fall off throughout the entire year. And TCU was able to run the conference the entire season and then lost an overtime game to a top 10 team on the road in a conference championship game who they had already beat earlier in the year. And we all agree that it's hard to beat a team twice in the same year.
That is true.
Just saying.
But when you just look at the teams, you look at Georgia, you look at Michigan, you look at TCU, and you look at Ohio State. Ohio State got in on honestly kind of a technicality. I
Yeah,
feel like
that's true.
because if USC would have beaten Utah and didn't lose to Utah twice this season,
they
they would
did.
have been in the college
But they
football
didn't,
playoff.
though.
So Ohio State kind of got
fate.
in there after losing 22 in the
It's
biggest
just fate.
and only most important game of the season. TCU, I'll argue with TCU saying that they ran the Big 12 conference in a very competitive Big 12 conference with Texas, Kansas even being better this season, Baylor being 6-6, West Virginia being 5-7, and they're one of the worst teams in the conference. But Michigan just has not let anybody even open the door on anything, including Ohio
Illinois?
State.
Yeah, what?
Illinois.
Michigan
Okay.
won on a last-second
Okay.
field against,
Okay,
against
okay.
Illinois.
Illinois, that's true. That's true. One Illinois. But Illinois had a good defensive team. They had a good team. They were ranked fourth in the Big Ten this year.
They have a really good
Maybe.
They have a really good
I mean,
defense.
They had
A
great
Big
defense.
They got
Ten
a
that saw a
top-ranked defense.
substantial fall off this year.
And McCarthy has gotten better and played better since that game.
I'll give you that, but you're still missing your star running back. And while Edwards may have been good so far, it's a 2-game sample size. You can't argue he's going to do it against in the college playoffs.
I mean, I can't argue that he's for sure going to do it, but I have a good indication that he's going to. I mean, look at it. Like 185 yards and 216 yards in back-to-back games, that proves that your offensive line, even if it's not the star caliber running back, you can still get that yardage. In college football, that's definitely.
I don't know if
that's
2
definitely a real
games is enough to
possibility.
prove anything.
I just think Ohio State, other than Georgia, Ohio State and Georgia have been the 2 most consistent teams all year. Other than one half, it hasn't even been close.
And then
Ohio
4
State-
quarters in which they almost lost to Maryland, but we'll skip over that also.
Hey, 43-30.
Every
win.
team's got a bad game.
Still,
You
we're
do it in
winning.
Georgia.
We're winning. At the end of the day, we're winning soundly against every
Michigan
team.
hasn't
other
had a bad
than
game.
one bad half. But I just think Georgia's not seeing
Illinois
a
kinda.
well better
you can say
coach
that.
team. Ryan Day's the best coach you've seen all year. Best offense, best overall team you've seen all year. And I just think we're gonna come out on
That's the
top.
dogs.
Last
It's the
time,
dogs,
That's what you
baby.
just
last
said.
time,
All
right,
last
boys,
time,
all right.
Just remember.
There is
four
only
in the nation,
only
we
one
won the
way.
national championship.
There's only one way we're
seed.
going to know who's right for sure, and that is to watch how these games are going to play out. More importantly, not more importantly, but the Kansas Jayhawks are going to take on Arkansas in the Liberty Bowl. It's the first time the Jayhawks will be in a bowl game since 2008, so we'll have that coming up for you after the break.
Welcome back. For our next debate, we have some KU football news. As Jordan said, the Jayhawks will take on the Arkansas Razorbacks in the Liberty Bowl on December 28th in Memphis. Last time the Jayhawks were in a bowl was 2008 in the Inside Bowl. Today, I'm joined by Jackson Tennant and Caleb Kalsich to discuss if this is a good matchup for Kansas and if they could even win. Jackson, what are your thoughts?
Caleb, I think this bowl game should be exciting, but sadly, I'm not feeling that this is a great matchup. I think Arkansas is going to win this game. I expect this to be a shootout, like I said, but the season has already been a success for Kansas. If they lose this game, it's a successful season no matter what. This is the first bowl game in 14 years. Arkansas needs to prove a point this year. They've been riddled with injuries all year, especially offensively and defensively, and quarterback KJ Jefferson and running back Rocket Sanders will be too much for that rushing attack for Arkansas. Rocket Sanders has rushed for 1,426 yards this season and 10 touchdowns. And Kansas has allowed running backs like Deuce Vaughn and Eric Gray to torch them this season, and I expect Rocket Sanders to be able to do the same. Quarterback KJ Jefferson is also going to have a statement game. He has missed a lot of games this year due to injury. He has 29 total touchdowns and only 4 interceptions. He has 510 rushing yards on the ground. He adds a lot to the run game, and I think that duo is going to be too much. Another thing about KJ, like I said, he only has 4 interceptions. He doesn't turn the ball over. KU defense relies a lot on the big play defensively, like whether that be a big defensive interception or a fumble. The Razorbacks don't really turn the ball over that much, and I don't see KU making enough big plays to beat Arkansas.
I do think this will be a good game, When this matchup was first announced, I'm sure when we heard it was a Big 12 SEC, we wanted a different team be playing.
Right.
But I'm sure they'll be fine with Arkansas. Just like Kansas, Arkansas's run defense is not great. In fact, both sides of the defense aren't great enough for both sides. Mm-hmm. And if it is a shootout, Kansas has played in multiple shootout games this year, and they've won more than they've lost. So I think that's going to help. But you said Arkansas struggled with injuries, and it's not going to help now that players like to opt out for bowl games. And I think Arkansas is going to have a lot of opt-outs. This was supposed to be a great season for them. They're supposed to compete for the SEC, maybe make a New Year's 6, and they dropped to 6-6. So I could see a lot of opt-outs. But for Kansas, you haven't made a bowl game in 14 years. I can't see how there's going to be – if you're going to not play, you're probably just not coming back next year. So I feel like Kansas is going to have their team at full strength, which is going to be really, really good for Kansas. I also expect them to use 2 quarterbacks. It's a bowl game. We've seen them use Daniels and Bean on the field at the same time. So it's a bowl game. You bring out all your trick plays. So Bean and Daniels, they both run, but they're different type runners. Daniels is more physical. Bean can run past you. So I think Kansas will use that to their advantage. Like you said, Kansas likes to use big plays, but we've seen that before. Kansas played Iowa State where they had to get big stops and big plays to beat Iowa State because Iowa State's defense was really good. And they've proved that they could stop their offense and get the plays done that they needed to.
I think that game against Iowa State's a good example for what you're talking about. But I believe that Kansas team that played Iowa State, so much has happened since then. And not to say that the season hasn't been a success for Kansas, but they've played different teams. We've seen that defense can be pretty weak. Arkansas, I agree, the defense is not very special this year, but a lot of that has to do with injuries and also the statistics, when you look at Arkansas's defense, you got to understand, they play SEC teams every single week, obviously besides non-conference, but you know what I mean. SEC is a whole different ball game than the Big 12, and Big 12 obviously has incredible offense as well, but it's just so offensively geared that Arkansas has played even tougher teams. So I just think that we're going to see the level of an SEC school versus a Big 12 school this year.
Well, you talk about SEC schools, but yeah, Arkansas lost to Missouri in the last game of the season. Missouri is not a very good team. No. Kansas had a backloaded schedule, right? They played Oklahoma, TCU, Kansas State, Baylor, Oklahoma State, all those teams, and Texas in the back part of their season. So they probably were physically brought down. They played some of the best schools in their back half of the season. Arkansas played theirs in the front half, right? They lost to Texas A&M and Jerry World on the field goal. They shouldn't have lost that game. Texas A&M was not very good. They had Alabama. Alabama was making mistakes, and they just couldn't get that one done either. So Arkansas has proved that they can't finish. They can't finish games when they absolutely need to. And that's why I think Kansas has sometimes proven that they can. Obviously, Baylor, and Oklahoma, they had opportunities to win that and just couldn't. They made mistakes. But you got to remember, they also had Jason Bean there. Jalen Daniels, when he was starting, he was able to make plays that won them the game. Jason Bean, whenever they played, sometimes just couldn't get it done.
It's understandable, but when you look at that Missouri and those Texas A&M games, you got to understand, Texas A&M beat LSU. Missouri almost hung in there with Georgia. In the SEC, anybody can be beaten. It's not to say that there's no such thing as bad losses, but the SEC competition in general is just a whole different ballgame.
I think it'll be a good game on December 28th, and we'll send it back to Max.
Thank you for tuning into today's show. As always, be sure to log on to the Sided Debates app or sided.co to start posting, voting, commenting, and on other people's debates. And follow us on social media at TakeaSideKU on both Instagram and Twitter for debates posted throughout our break. Thanks for watching. For all of us here at Take a Side, we'll see you live next semester.